that the technical issues haven't come here. So yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm happily accepting the challenge of summarizing the 108 pages of the proposal for you tonight in the next 30 minutes, and then we see how it goes. Let me try to share my screen for you, and then here we go. So we're talking tonight about the recent proposal that the EU Commission has published on an Artificial Intelligence Act. And I would like to start with the actual intention that the EU Commission is following, with the aim the EU Commission is following with that proposal. So this act is not about punishing anyone. It's not about intentionally keeping all AI from the market or something like that. But rather, the EU Commission sees the great value of AI on the market and in innovation in general. And they want to increase the use of AI because they see a certain lack of trust, a certain mistrust in AI in many companies. The EU Commission thinks that not enough companies are using AI. And they think by setting up this regulation and bringing rules for any kind of AI to the market, they will increase the use of AI in the internal market. So I'm sure we'll chat later about whether or not they are able to reach that aim, that goal. So let's see what they're actually setting up here. So what we're talking about here is still a proposal. It's not the act itself. This is not in effect yet. Rather, the EU Commission worked on that quite for a while. They also had considerable discussions with certain stakeholders. They asked for input from all kinds of interested persons from the industry, also from other regulators. And now this proposal will be considered by the Council of the EU and by the European Parliament. And it's very likely that some provisions will be amended during the next 18 to 24 months. That's how long it usually takes to set up or to adopt such a law, such an act. And then once adopted, the act will presumably still leave a certain grace period to companies to change their, let's say, surroundings of AI or even their products. So of course, if it takes until 2024, 2025, until this is actually in effect for all of you, of course, there's a risk that there might be certain technological developments in the meantime, and this is kind of outdated. But we'll see. This is actually a practical issue that we deal with later. So let's get into the actual scope. What does this proposal affect? Let's say it this way. So the proposal is all about AI systems. That's how they call it. And the definition of AI systems you see here in this nice purple underlined text. So it says AI systems is software that is developed with one or more of the following techniques and approaches. Actually, I see that this is a bit annoying because you can't see all of the text. Huh? Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't change that now. Otherwise, it might take hours for me to get back. So this list of techniques and approaches is usually in an annex. It's Annex 1 of the proposal, if you ever get your hands on the actual proposal. So they try to put in all techniques, all approaches that they can imagine will be used to set up AI. And then they put in another requirement into the definition that says software that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, generate output such as predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing the environments. So this definition is leaned on the OECD definition. The EU Commission said, okay, this is an international definition which is already valuable. People know it, people can work with it, so we also use it. It's very broad. The reason for that is that they try to cover all kinds of AI systems on the market. They don't want to concentrate only on a sector, but they rather want to affect everything. That does not mean that there are new rules for every AI system. It only means that the proposal is generally affecting everything. And we'll see later what that means, but you don't have to worry so far. Maybe later, but not so far. So let's take a quick look at the territorial scope. So the proposal, the AIA, as I call it, is in effect for providers placing AI on the market or putting it into service in the European Union. So if they are seated in the European Union, or also for users which are located in the Union. And also if the output generated by the AI system is used in the EU. So also if the provider and the user are outside of the European Union, as long as the output is used in the EU, then it also comes into effect, is also relevant for you. As you might hear, the EU Commission is following a risk-based approach. So they want to affect all kinds of AI systems, but they have different rules for different kinds of AI systems. So they are differentiating here between 4 types. We have unacceptable AI system. That's probably the smallest group. We have high-risk AI systems with a rather long catalog of new provisions, which will come into effect. Then in this yellow group, which is low risk, lower risk, still okay. We have AI systems for which there will be transparency obligations. And then in the lowest group, green, everything is fine. We have AI which is permitted without any new restrictions. And the EU Commission actually said, according to their opinion, 80 to 85% of all AI systems which are currently in use fall into this green category. So what does that mean? 4 types of AI systems which are considered unacceptable, which are prohibited. So that is social scoring by public authorities, not social scoring by private entities, but by public authorities or on their behalf. Then we have practices that have a, I can't read it right. That doesn't work, sorry. Also not very useful for you. Okay. Can somebody tell me if you still see it?
No, we cannot see it.
We can't, you can't see it right now. That's a pity.
Yes.
Okay, I try it again. Let me try that again. Because okay. I move it a bit. Doesn't look so nice for you, but at least you get the full text. That's probably of more value for you. Huh? Okay. So second group of AI which is unacceptable. These are practices that have a significant potential to manipulate persons through subliminal techniques beyond their consciousness, and in the end causing or are likely to cause physical or psychological harm. Then the third group will include AI systems that exploit the vulnerabilities of specific vulnerable groups, like children or persons with disabilities. And the fourth group includes real-time remote biometric identification systems in publicly accessible spaces for the purpose of law enforcement. So a very narrow group of AI systems. So as I said, I mean, there is a reason why this group of unacceptable AI system is on the top of the pyramid, because it actually includes only 4 types of AI. So this group, high-risk AI systems, much more relevant, much more interesting for you. Because as I said, there will be a rather long list of new requirements with regard to compliance of high-risk AI system. What is a high-risk AI system? So there are two options, 2 chances for you to fall into this category of high-risk AI system. The first one you see here on the left includes AI that is intended to be used as a safety component of a product, or which is a product itself, and is covered by certain EU regulations, which are listed in Annex 2 of the proposal. For example, the regulation on medical devices, Second requirement, the product to which the AI is a safety component, or the product which the AI system is itself, is subject to a third-party ex-ante conformity assessment according to this regulation that it falls into. So the EU Commission said, okay, we have this list of regulations. We put together EU regulations which are already in place and which deal with certain very risky fields for fundamental EU rights. For example, medical devices, toys, robots, or also IVF. So if your AI is included in, for example, a medical device, and this medical device falls under the medical device regulation, then you will be automatically a high-risk AI system. Second option to fall into this category is you have an AI system in a certain area which is listed in Annex 3 of the proposal. And here on the right in this orange field, I give you certain examples of Annex 3. So we have real-time and post-remote biometric identification, AI used in the management and operation of road traffic, supply of water, gas, heating, electricity, evaluation of creditworthiness, credit score, in the field of HR or recruitment, evaluation of candidates in the course of interviews or tests, or also in the field of law enforcement, AI, which is used for the assessment of the risk of a natural person for offending or re-offending. So if your AI system deals with one of these fields, then you're also automatically considered as high-risk AI systems. Consequence of both is it's permitted to bring such AI system on the market or to use it, but only if it is compliant with certain mandatory requirements and subject to an ex-ante conformity assessment. This needs to be done before the AI system is put on the market. Or if it is already on the market and the AIA would come into effect, then of course you need to do all this compliance when the proposal comes into effect, when the law comes into effect. So what are the actual compliance requirements? First, one which is very important concerning data and data governance. The EU Commission wants from you, if your AI system falls into this category, a high quality of the training, validation, and testing data sets used to minimize risks and discriminatory outcomes, as they say. We might discuss later whether they're really capable of prevent discriminatory outcomes. So here, for example, very interesting, the proposal explicitly says the data shall be relevant, representative, free of errors, and complete. And I hope one or some of you can give me later feedback on whether this requirement or prerequisite actually makes sense. Free of errors, what does that mean? Is that objective or subjective? Complete data. Is it possible to tell in advance that the data you're using is complete? It might be very interesting to get some feedback on that point from your side. Next topic under which you can summarize some of the compliance requirements deals with transparency, safety, and control. The EU Commission asks for technical documentation of the AI system and its purpose. Records need to be kept. Transparency is of big importance so that users are enabled to understand and control how the high-risk AI system produces its output. The EU Commission asks for an appropriate human oversight in order to minimize risks, including a stop button. So somebody shall be able to press a stop button for the AI system if something goes wrong. Also, my questions to the audience, whether this is actually possible to include a stop button that can be used in worst case scenario. Then there's the requirement of a high level of accuracy, robustness, cybersecurity, an appropriate risk management system. And then we have conformity and post-market measures, which the EU Commission requires. That means we need an ex-ante conformity assessment and a registration obligation. The EU Commission is thinking of an EU database where all high-risk AI systems have to be registered. And we also have, once the AI system is on the market, a post-market monitoring and fault reporting obligation. So let's take a look at a kind of action plan. Necessary steps for the provider. I mean, there are also duties for the user, duty for the importer or distributor, but I guess also here in this community, the duties for the provider are actually the most important one. So necessary steps for the provider are, prior to the market introduction, ensure that the design, development, and quality management system are compliant with the regulation rules, undergo a conformity assessment aimed at assessing and documenting compliance. This can usually actually be done by the provider himself. For some kinds of AI systems, the notified body shall be included, must be included, but generally companies have to do it themselves. And after this conformity assessment is finished, positively finished, and you are compliant, affix a CE marking to the AI system, sign a declaration of conformity, and register with the EU databank that I just mentioned. And then once it is on the market, there needs to be a constant monitoring in case of changes or further development of the AI system. The conformity assessment shall be adjusted so that it's always up to date. And if there are any incidents which might cause a non-compliance of the AI system, then they need to be reported to the notified bodies, which shall actually be set up according to the will of the EU Commission. So if you fall into this high-risk AI system category because you have a product or you have an AI system which is part of a product, which falls under a regulation listed in Annex 2, you might ask yourself, okay, for example, if I have a medical device, there are already a lot of compliance requirements in the MDR, medical device regulation. So what about these requirements now? Do they come on top, or which one are relevant? Only the AIA, or is it a combination of both? So the EU Commission is totally aware of the problem of over-regulating. Maybe they just can't help it. They actually explicitly put into the proposal that they have been warned by certain stakeholders of a kind of over-regulation with regard to these other regulations. But yeah, they say that these other regulations in Annex 2 shall be amended by the AIA. And for example, if it foresees a conformity assessment procedure, then the provider shall follow the conformity assessment procedure, which is set up by the, let's say, medical device regulation, but amended by certain requirements which are new here in the IIA, which as a consequence leads to the authority, the notified body, which is foreseen by the medical device regulation. This notified body now also has to take a look at the AIA, needs to consider whether the new requirements are also followed, which in my mind might be a problem in practice, because there shall be competent authority for medical devices, and now it shall also be competent for AI. I'd like to also hear your opinion on whether that's possible or not. We'll see. Maybe we'll only see in practice. But in my mind, that might actually be a problem, which might not be foreseen by people who put this on paper. But yeah, we'll see. So getting away from the very interesting, very important category of high-risk AI systems to a slightly less important category in the practice, according to my opinion, the specific lower risk AI systems, which have to undergo a certain transparency obligation. So this group of lower risk AI systems only includes AI systems for which an interaction between natural persons and AI systems happen, for example, for a chatbot, which include emotional recognition or biometric categorization system, or which include deepfake. Only these 3 categories fall into this overall category. And for this type of AI system, we have an information duty. So the affected human shall be informed about the fact that there is an AI on the other side. There are no details yet as to how this information shall look like, but maybe that will be picked up by the member states that actually have to implement the AIA later once it is adopted. And then the 4th category, the rest, for example, AI-enabled video games or spam filters. This type of AI system is permitted with no restriction. You don't have to do anything. You can set up a code of conduct if you want. That's how the EU Commission sets it up. So if the provider wants, it could follow the requirements for high-risk AI systems by setting these standards up in its company by following a code of conduct. It's a little bit similar to the GDPR, where certain types of companies are also required to have a code of conduct. But you don't have to. I guess it will only be very big companies, very big providers, which will set up code of conduct. Otherwise, there might be industry associations that come up with drafts of such codes. But again, you don't have to. You're fine as long as you fall into this category. You can bring the AI system on the market without any further requirements. Probably one of the most important slides here. What are the consequences of non-compliance? Similar to the GDPR, we have high administrative fines in this proposal. So first group on the left, there would be fines up to 30 million or 30 million euros or 6% of the total worldwide annual turnover of the preceding financial year for non-compliance with regard to, first of all, the unacceptable AI systems. So if your AI system falls into the first category that I talked about, you bring it on the market anyway. This is the group you might fall into. Or if there is non-compliance with the data governance requirements that I mentioned in the first line on the respective slide. Middle group, fines up to 20 million euros or 4% of the total worldwide annual turnover of the preceding financial year for non-compliance with any other requirements. For example, if you do the conformity assessment and you ask yourself, what kind of AI system do I have? And you say, okay, I have one which is low risk, falls into the 4th category, and actually you have a high risk AI system, you would fall into this type of fine. And then third group, fines of up to 10 million euros or 2% of the total worldwide annual turnover for the supply of incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information after being requested to give some information by notified bodies or national competent authorities. So quite high fines. And we see this with the GDPR that the fines have actually increased a lot in comparison to the older national data protection regulations. So yeah, obviously the EU Commission is interested in compliance. So that's what they set up to prevent any non-compliance. And also an interesting point, the EU Commission is actually proposing measures to support innovation, but they are not mandatory for the member states. The EU Commission says member states might set up regulatory sandboxes, kind of safe haven for companies to just try to set up AI systems and see how it's working, how it's going. Problem here in Germany is that the German government seemed quite reluctant with regard to setting regulatory sandboxes up. So if this stays in the proposal, we would have to see whether there would actually be regulatory sandboxes. And also the EU Commission is proposing certain other measures aimed to support small-scale users and startups. That's how they write it. for example, with priority access to regulatory sandboxes, and also help with applying the AIA. But there, again, there are not too many details in the proposal so far. So we would have to see how the member states would actually implement these suggestions. So this was a short summary of the over 100 pages. Yeah, I hope you got at least a small feeling for it, and happy to answer any questions.